My name is Travis Vulture, and I suffer from type 1 bipolar disorder. I can't even, I'm starting to cry already. Alright, keep going. Hi, I'm Travis Vulture, and I suffer from type 1 bipolar disorder. I would claim, there's a lot of stigma with mental illness, and, people have a very 1950s kind of attitude about it where just don't talk about it. It's not happening. Well, it definitely happens, and it's something that it's like a ghost on my back. It rears its head eventually. Sometimes the ghost isn't there. You know what I mean? Sometimes it's not there, but sometimes out of nowhere it rears its head, and it basically just consumes my life. In the last 2 years, I've really struggled with type 1 bipolar disorder, and I've been arrested 10 times. I've, had multiple wellness checks done on me, and I think that it's all because I wasn't taking my mental illness serious. I think there's a lot of stigma. I know there's a lot of stigma with mental illness and what it really is. I think a lot of people say that bipolar happens to be something like I get depressed, I'm sad. I happen to suffer from type 1 where it's a little bit like schizophrenia, where I get in these delusional, paranoid states, and it can be pretty traumatic for people that are around me or experience it firsthand, where I'm out in the real world and I have an episode or something. One of my biggest episodes happened at two half-price books locations, 2 days apart from each other. I had come here and I wanted to basically sell some books because I was in what I'd call a drug haze. I was smoking tons of marijuana, and I think there's not a lot of research based on marijuana and the effects with a severely mentally ill person. But what doctors have told me recently is that you can get yourself in cannabis-induced psychosis. And I was pretty sure I was involved in that when I showed up here about a year or 2 years ago. I came in and I was just not myself. I was totally in an altered state. I was delusional. I was extremely paranoid, kind of like looking out the windows kind of paranoia. And I showed up to sell some really fucking crappy books that I had literally just found. And so I put my books down and I hand the seller my ID, and he hands me the ID back, and I start walking the aisles, and I was like kind of talking to myself and just like kind of like, really out of it. And I walked past where they had like the Garfield books. I'm a huge Garfield fan. And I see this seller that every time I had sold previously, the other people would offer me like 10, 15 bucks. He would offer me like $4 or $5 or like $2, or like one time he offered me like $1.50. So my brain starts just like melting. I'm like so paranoid. I'm like, okay, there's no way that now this guy is gonna tell the booksellers, that he should offer me like the lowest price. So I was in this like complete delusion and just paranoid state. And I walk up to the guy and I'm like kind of like speaking in tongues now. I'm just like kind of like in almost like a schizophrenic like kind of state. And I'm like, I walk up to him and he's just kind of putting books away a little bit. And I walk up and I'm like, and I like remember I kind of like went like this, like that. And the guy, I was like getting in the guy's face, and he's obviously like, the first thing he asks is like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, I was kind of like, I don't want to do it again, but I was like speaking in tongues, kind of like, kind of, and just totally paranoid. And I was just trying to like get back at the guy for, I don't know why, but I was trying to get back at the guy for offering me like $1.50 for the crappy books that I used to find. So I start walking the aisles, and I basically start walking the aisles, and suddenly there's this other bookseller, and she's putting a book away, and she turns to me like that and it's like, you need to leave right now, we're about to call the police. So any mental ill, like severely mentally ill person will tell you, the second the cops are mentioned, that's like kryptonite to like Superman. Like, we're out of there, you know what I mean? We're getting out. So I kind of grab my books, and I'm in this kind of frantic state, and I leave that day, and I think I'm like, all right, if I'm not allowed there for that day, I'm gonna go to the one, like, I'm gonna go to a Half Price Books like 20 miles away. So I go to the one like 15, 20 miles away in Brookfield, Wisconsin. This is the Greenfield location. And the next day I head there, and I do the same thing. I put the books down, I give my ID, and I basically give my ID, and the guy's like, all right, we'll have it like a price for you in the next 20 minutes. So I basically start walking the aisles, and I tell myself, I'm like, all right, don't, because I am still in like my hypomania, delusional kind of state. So I say to myself, I'm like, all right, well, don't speak in tongues or let them know that you're sick, that you're like mentally ill, that you should not be in the world right now. You should be at like a mental institution. So basically I like kind of just stay away from the bookseller, and he calls me up and is like, oh, my offer is $4. So the first thing I do is I grab the ticket from his hand, like yank it from his hand, and I start walking towards the line to like get cashed out. And the guy thinks he's gonna play hero here and confront me. So the first thing he does is he's like, oh, like, I don't really remember what he said, but he basically just called me out for like grabbing that ticket and said like, you know, you should be glad we're even taking the books. So the first thing, without even blinking, I do is I turn to him and I say, you fuck babies, you fuck children. And then he's like, he kind of clenches his fist a little bit, and he's like, you motherfucker. And I turn to a mother and daughter who have some books in their hand, they're about to buy them, and I say, you see this guy? You see this guy? He fucks babies, he fucks children. And I'm like, how do you like fucking babies? So he is like, I want to call this guy a class act because he didn't like jump me right there. He goes and gets his manager, and this woman kind of comes up. She kind of looks like that chick, the teacher at the Magic School Bus. And she comes up or whatever, and she's like, you know, if this guy's like endangering children, we need to like file a police report. So that's the second time I heard the cops. So I was like, okay, I'm out of here. So I just start like walking. I'm like, forget the fucking books, they're trash, nobody wants to give me anything for them. So I'm kind of walking out, and Miss Frizzle starts to follow me to my car. And like at this point, I'm in such a delusional state that I'm just like, I don't even care. Like in the last 2 years of my life, I like didn't even care about like getting arrested. I was arrested over 10 times. So I just like, I kind of turned to her, and she's like following me, and she's got her smartphone out, and she's gonna take pictures. And as I get in my 1998 Ford Taurus, I get in, and as I'm about to step in, I turn to Miss Frizzle and I say, hey, you know, I hope you get a good shot of the license plate as I drive away. And I drove off that day. So as I'm pulling out onto Capitol, I think that's Capitol Drive, I basically, I'm like laughing to myself. I'm like, okay, you are so severely mentally ill. You've now been kicked out of 2 half-price books in a row, and And I'm like giggling to myself, like sometimes when you're mentally ill, you literally have to laugh at some of the things that happen to you. So I'm like, okay, that was super fucked up, but let's just keep living life. So a few weeks pass and I get some more books and I decide, I'm like, all right, like let's go sell them back here at the Greenfield Half Price Books. You know, time has passed. So I come in and I'm in a better state because I just started on a $2,000 a month schizophrenia shot. So during that time period, I was trying to like petition to get this schizophrenia shot because I had been arrested so many times for my mental health, and I had been, you know, so many weird, bizarre things I was like doing in my life. So the government granted me these schizophrenia shots. So I think I'm like, all right, I'm gonna come back here and I'm going to, now that I'm on these shots, I'm just gonna like, you know, be normal and sell these books. So, you know, I give them the ID, I, you know, put the books down, and I basically start walking the aisles. And I sit down and I'm reading on my smartphone, like I think the Kindle app, and I'm sitting in one of the chairs in the back, and suddenly the Greenfield police come through the door, and I'm like, again, when you're mentally ill and the cops show up, you like, even if it's not for you, you're like, oh my God, they're after me. But in this moment when I watched them walk through the door, I basically was like, oh, they're here for me. They're definitely here for me. So they go to the bookseller points me out. They come up to me and they say, hey man, you know, they're really nice. The Greenfield PD is like super cool about mental illness. And they sit down and they're like, hey man, you know, a few weeks ago you came in here and you basically attacked, you know, like verbally, like these people, and they're kind of scared of you and they don't want you to sell here anymore and you're not allowed to be here. So I basically explained that, you know, over the last 2 years of my life, I had left a severely abusive relationship and I was arrested 10 times and I was petitioning, I was kicked out of improv comedy, and I had all this really bad stuff, just one after the other, just pounding me up the ass. And the cops were like, oh, well, you know, we don't want to arrest you or anything, we just want you to leave. And they informed me that basically if I left and came back another time, that I would be arrested. There was one huge problem with this though, is they wanted to walk me out of the store into my car. But I did drive there, but I didn't have my driver's license. So I'm standing with these books, and they're like, did you drive here, Travis? And I'm like, oh, no, my girl dropped me off. So they're like, all right, we'll call your girl. So I waited over there by Exclusive Company, and I basically waited there because they were like basically waiting to see if I was gonna get in my car, and I just didn't have my driver's license. So eventually they left, and I just got in my 1998 Ford Taurus and I drove home, and it was the start of basically changing my life for the better. Once I got my shots of the $2,000 worth of schizophrenia medication, my life started to slowly turn around a little bit. I had to really, really work at it. I have to see a mental health doctor every month and make sure that my schizophrenia shot is totally working. I'm in therapy now, and it makes me really sad. It makes me really sad that mental illness is like a fucking ghost. It literally like is chasing you at all times, and sometimes it just consumes you. And as a kid, I really liked Garfield the cat, and I used to love coming to bookstores, and it's literally a travesty that I'm not allowed to be at a bookstore in the town I live in, because it just fucking sucks that I get kicked out of certain places and my mental illness rears its head, and I'm not a bad guy. I just think that sometimes mental illness gets the best of me. But I think that it's being on the track of medication, seeing my doctor, seeing a therapist that has kind of got me back to what they call like a baseline in mental illness, is like where you start from. So I think just any mental illness person should try to be on that path, because the other part of the path is the fact that you will get kicked out of every place that you go to. You will be arrested. You will be in prison. You will get shot by the police if you are in your delusional, hypermanic state, basically. And I just want to close with, if this video were to go viral or something, I would want Half Price Books to know that I'm on the right medication now. I'm not the person that I was when I showed up here like a year and a half, 2 years ago. I'm in a way better place in my life, and it's all thanks to taking that first step and really making sure that that you're in control. I think that's what's going to destigmatize mental illness, is we need to be in control.